Good morning, and welcome to Strictly Business. I'm your host, Penny Font. This podcast features conversations with Louisiana's most influential CEOs, entrepreneurs, and community leaders, with the goal of providing insights, ideas, and inspiration to help you and your business grow. Strictly Business is brought to you by the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Without their support, this project would not be possible. Before we begin, here's a brief message from our sponsor.
The East Baton Rouge Parish Library believes that a thriving business community is good for us all. That's why we help entrepreneurs start businesses with tools like Gale Business Builder. Keep commerce rolling by providing access to computers, printers, and free Wi-Fi at 14 branch locations. Get a library card. Grow your business at ebrpl.com/business.
Thank you. We want to keep Strictly Business as interactive as possible. So for those joining us live, here's an icebreaker question for you. Submit your vote in the comments, and the results will be posted at the end of the webcast. This morning features a special Influential Women in Business episode of Strictly Business. I'm joined today by three of our 2026 honorees who didn't just climb the ladder, they questioned whether the ladder was leaning against the right wall. Meredith Eicher rebuilt her life from the ground up to become a sought-after executive coach who holds a mirror up to some of this region's most powerful leaders. Adonica Pelichet Duggan is founder and CEO of the Baton Rouge Alliance for Students, where she's wiring education equity into the future of this community. And Dr. Gunjan Raina walked away from the traditional medical model to build a practice that treats patients like family, because she believes that's what medicine was always supposed to be. Today's conversation is about rewriting the rules, trusting your instincts, building what doesn't exist yet, and the personal cost of leading change. Let's begin with a question for all three of you. When you look back, was there a single moment, like a pivot point, where you knew the path you were going on wasn't going to be enough? What changed for you? Dr. Raina, let's start with you.
So I think for me, I was in practice about 7 to 8 years into my practice, and I had a nurse practitioner. And during that visit, I remember clearly there was a death of a spouse. One of our patients lost her husband, and the day was busy and she wasn't able to convey that message to me. So I saw the same patient 6 months later. And when I saw her, I felt awful and just so disconnected from her that I didn't realize her husband had passed away 6 months before that. And I think that's when I decided I needed to do something different, that this wasn't the path, so this wasn't how I wanted to practice medicine. And that changed the trajectory of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Adonica, what about you?
You know, there's this quote that I love that says, "Where's the pain in the world that you can't bear? That's the very thing that you were born to help heal." And for me, like, I had worked in school systems and I'd been proximate to the students who needed the most help. And I just really didn't feel like we were getting the conditions right for educators to be successful. And so for me, it was just like, I have got to lean into this problem. I kept waiting for someone else to pick up the charge and start to create the political conditions and really focus on that. And it was definitely out of my comfort zone, but I just couldn't sit there anymore and watch the conditions that educators were working in and the families were having to navigate not be improved. And so yeah, that's where we are.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. Meredith?
So I think it was one night after, like at 2 a.m. banging out tax returns. I was tired and I got up at 4:30 and I said, God, is this it? Is this all there is? Is this my life? And I thought, it's 95% about people and 5% about the numbers. And there I was just submerged in numbers. And so I think as much as I adored my clients, I just thought there's more to it. There's a better way to have impact on people. So that was kind of like that pivot point.
I want to continue with you a little bit. You've described a fire in your belly from early on, political ambitions, big vision, and then life took a very different turn. Over the course of your career, you've been engaged in a family business, worked as a short order cook, and at one point had, as you talked about your accounting business, 650 accounting clients. And then you walked away from all of that. Most people would have called the accounting practice a success story and stopped there. But tell us more about what kept pushing you.
I think that I always, growing up, my dad used to say, "Did you do your best?" He would never look at my report card. He would never ask, did you achieve this or that? He would always say, "Did you do your best?" And I always had this voice in my head that there was more, that I could do more, that I could have this bigger impact. And as a result, I always thought I could do more, be better, give back more. And then there was my mom's voice in the back of my head that said, "You can do anything you put your mind to." And that was maybe a statement of a cliche. She used to just say, anything you decide you can do, you can do. And so I just think it goes back to those two things, that voice in my head kept pushing and saying, no matter what, you can do better, be better, and you could put your mind to it. So that was the fire, that was the burn. And I don't miss the short order cook. I just want to mention that. Or the crap stealer. I was a crap stealer as well. So
that's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Raina, you've said openly that medicine wasn't your dream. It was your father's, and you came to Baton Rouge planning to stay 3 years and leave. At what point did this place and this work become genuinely yours?
So I think like once you start taking care of patients and you see their stories unfold, it's almost like human behavior, like you need to hang on to find out how this is going to unfold. And then you build such deep rooted connections with your patients. I remember in residency, they always used to tell us, don't take anything home, don't take anything personally, listen to your patient from one ear and then let it out the other ear. When you go home, don't take that stuff with you. And I never followed that advice. I was kind of rebellious. I kind of did the things that other people didn't. And I took the worries home with me, and I took the patient burden home with me. I have a lot of empathy for people, and it's who I am. So once I started practicing medicine in this community, my plan of jetting out of here in 3 years just, went away. And this is home, and I want to be here for a long, long time.
Well, we're very glad to have you here. Adonica, your family story is remarkable. A grandfather who didn't have access to formal education beyond grade school, a mother who became an educator, and a conviction that opportunity shouldn't depend on the luck of your birth. So when did that family legacy become a professional mission rather than just something personal for you?
I think a lot about my own journey and how, sometimes purpose is deep-rooted within who you are and you don't know it yet. I was a communications major, thought I would be working in a newsroom, covering stories, always wanted to be a newspaper reporter my entire life, and went to work in communications for school districts. Thinking this is going to be a quick stop on a larger communications career, and really fell into the education work that had been so much a part of my family's story, and got connected in that work and just kept advancing in school districts. And I think that what you are convicted about, sometimes you don't know when you're a young person. And so it took a little time for me to realize that this wasn't just a stop, but that education was something that was so deeply rooted in who I was as a human being. And the things that I took for granted about my own experience were not everyone's experience. And when I got to be really up close and personal with that, I started to say, this is something that I've got to be working on fixing and changing, because I think that education is so important to how we build communities.
Absolutely. What a shift. Each of you made decisions that from the outside probably looked risky or maybe even wrong. So let's talk about instinct and what it costs to follow it. Dr. Raina, you looked at a medical model built around efficiency, thousands of patients, fast appointments, and said essentially, as you've discussed, that's not how I want to practice medicine. That's really not a small decision, obviously. What do you say to physicians or any professional who can see that the system is broken but kind of feels trapped inside of it?
So, a lot of people love to complain, including, doctors. And I always hear a lot of chatter in the medical field that insurance is awful, seeing 20, 30 patients in a day is not feasible. I think at the end of the day, we all have a choice. And you have to make a choice and execute a plan after that choice. It's easy to sit back in the driver's seat and complain all day long. But if you see that a system is broken or you're not at peace with it, you need to make a choice and make a difference and execute thereafter. And that's what I did in 2016, 2017. I was unhappy. And, when I laid at night in bed, I was like, how do I want to show up for the world? How do I want to show up for my 2 daughters? What is my legacy going to be? And that's when I decided to make a choice.
Meredith, you've built a career helping leaders identify their own blind spots. When you made the leap from accounting to coaching, what blind spots did you have to confront about yourself?
How much time do we have here? I have had several, and still am uncovering blind spots as I go along. I think primarily that my directness sometimes came across as abrupt, and maybe I left dead bodies along the way. What I thought was passion and drive just maybe didn't land, and I needed to just step back, take a breath. Also needed to learn to speak to others' style, what would speak to them. Not always being that go, 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 push, 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 always worked. The other, I think, for me was learning that listening and being curious was first and foremost. Oftentimes I wanted to jump in and solve it. And early on, we get a lot of attaboys, attagirls for doing that. And yet, really, the power is in the ability to listen and be curious. And I have to say, the last blind spot, Penny, is that we have a choice every day how we show up. We can show up with peace and ambition and wonder, or there are those that, at times I would live in that kind of resentment and resignation, a whole lot of anxiety. And I think that blind spot for me was every day I can show up and I can be peaceful and ambitious and with curiosity and wonder. Huge, huge game changer and a choice. Definitely a choice.
That is such great advice. Thank you. Adonica, when you founded the Alliance, there were already organizations working on education in this region. But what told you instinctively that this organization needed to exist in a different way and that you were the right person to build it into something the community didn't yet have?
It's funny. I'm not yet sure if I was the right person to build it, but I knew that it was something that was needed. It actually took a lot of convincing because it was definitely a step out of my comfort zone. But it was something that I realized I couldn't wait for someone else to solve the problems that I was seeing. I think that we have a great policy environment in education in Louisiana. People might not understand that about Louisiana education. We have a really great policy environment. But great policy environments don't mean that that's actually what's happening in execution. And so for me, it was, I would see the conditions and what was possible, or the way that educators could be paid, or the way that we could, focus on the needs of students. But then at a local level, no one was paying attention to whether the people we had elected to do that were actually doing that and taking advantage of the opportunities. And so I said, there's not somebody who wakes up every day thinking about how this is going to play out in Baton Rouge. And for me, I thought about Baton Rouge kids first. And so it was just like everyone kept saying, you should definitely think about whether or not this is the thing that you should do. And I said, I really wish somebody would do that. And, I was like, but then I realized, we are the stepper uppers. You are the people who have to step up. If you want something fixed, you have to be the person who's willing to put yourself in the line of fire to fix it. And so for me, that was just like, I had this recognition. I couldn't wait for somebody else to fix something that I had such a front row seat to. I had to be the person who stepped in.
And you were definitely the right person. So all three of you didn't just change jobs. You actually built something new. So let's talk a little bit about what that actually requires. Dr. Raina, concierge medicine is still a model that many people don't really fully understand or can't access. You text your patients on random Tuesdays, you've mentioned. You've had people come in just to sit in your lobby. You said it doesn't even feel at all like a doctor's office. Was that the goal from day one, or did the model evolve over time?
So I really think that was the goal from day one. I chose to do family medicine because in my heart, it's truly an extension of your family, an extension of your care. So I truly see my patients as an extension of my family. And, how did the model evolve over time? We just reinvented the wheel. I mean, whatever felt right, like intuitively, whatever felt right, I followed my heart and passion. So for example, early days of when I started the practice, I used to show up at the grocery store with my patients, trying to help them how to purchase groceries and what to buy and what not to buy, read labels. We used to have cooking shows at the house. I would cook and we would have patients come up and everyone had their own station. We've had several patients that have, passed away that were in hospice care, end of life, where you just show up to their house on a random Saturday with some ice cream and you sit and chat. And this patient doesn't have a long time left, but you're just there. So it's really about treating your patients just like your family. Like, how would you want to be treated? And role model that over and over again, year after year. And it just turns into a lifestyle. It's no longer a job. It's who I am.
That is amazing. You are one of a kind. Meredith, when you launched your first Vistage peer group, you had to find your own clients and convince them to trust something brand new. You built that first group of 8, one by one. What did you learn in that process about selling an idea that people don't know they need yet?
I think that what I learned is it's not transactional. It's not a sale. It is an offer, and it is about each one of them. It was each one of the CEOs that I work with, and I think I'm at 38 or 39 on a monthly basis, and it's about their need, their concern, what's important to them. What is it that's keeping them up at night? What is it that runs through their head on a racetrack? And so when I was in that process, it was about what was important and just listening to them. It was not like, oh, I got to sign them. It's a transaction. It was more about how could I be of service? And at the same time, I had to believe in the offer. And the offer was that wisdom is in community. Wisdom is not individual, that you don't have to do it alone. And I've always been that person that believed in that. So staying grounded in the belief in what I was doing and staying very focused on them, on that CEO, that individual need and concern.
Thank you for sharing that. Adonica, the Changemakers program is in its 8th cycle and has graduated more than 200 leaders. That's very impressive. You deliberately build cohorts with people who are different from each other, and you don't charge participants, both intentional choices. Walk us through the thinking behind those decisions and what it brings to accomplishing your mission.
Meredith just said wisdom is in community, and I think that is so true. I always joke, my daddy has this saying, a broken clock is right twice a day, and definitely I think that was one for that day for me with Changemakers. I was going to cocktail parties and I was, in social settings, and no one knew what was happening with public education in our city. And so at its core, it was just about creating more informed cocktail party talkers. I wanted people to have the facts behind what they were talking about as we understood what was happening in public education. But I also realized that one of the most Baton Rouge questions we ask is, where'd you go to high school? Because we put people in boxes based on where they went to high school, and something about them, something about their family, something about their choices. And so, for me, Changemakers is the opportunity to sit with people you wouldn't necessarily encounter in your daily life and learn more about their lived experience and to talk with them about what's happening in public education and gain this shared understanding, and then build this network of people who are on fire about the way that we serve kids in the same way that you are. And I've been really excited. It's been one of the greatest joys to see how many people will give you a day a month to talk about how we can better serve kids in this city. And so we take them on school tours. We, take them to a city visit. We have them engage with policymakers, and they have the opportunity to deepen their own knowledge and then build a set of people who aren't like them, who didn't have the same experience as them, who they wouldn't necessarily encounter in their regular social circles, and get on fire for kids and work on improving that together. So I think Meredith is right. Wisdom is built in community, and we have to be understanding of the experiences that are at. We want to really improve the way that we're serving kids in this city.
That's a wonderful program. Here's one for all three of you. When you're building something new, there's a period before it works, obviously, when you're sustaining it on belief alone. And I want to know a little bit more about that. What kept you going during that phase? Meredith, let's start with you.
Being grounded in who I am. I have a contract with myself, and some people call it positive affirmation, but I'll get up in the morning before I would make those phone calls or meet. Some were cold calls, some were not cold calls, but I would be just grounded that I started with the I am statement every morning. And I believe that staying grounded in who you are at your core, you will bring that forward. You will emulate that. That will be who you are. That's what will come out each day. And for me, if I got a no or I don't know, I never took anything as a no. I just always took it as a no, not right now. And many people I've come back to that are all in it, that said that weren't into it 5 years ago, we're into it today. So I think just staying grounded in ourselves and believing in what we do. Like when I listen to Adonica speak, you can tell she believes in what she does. You listen to Gunjan, Dr. Raina, and she believes in what she does. So when we have a deep-seated belief in what we do, and I believe what I do makes a difference to so many lives, not just the CEOs, but all the people that they influence and they employ. So I just believe in it. It's like it's at the core of me.
I love that. Dr. Raina?
I remember clearly, I've mentioned this in the article, 2017, 18, and 19 were 3 years where I started the business. And, went from a comfortable doctor's salary to absolutely nothing. And we were fortunate enough, we had my husband's salary and we were managing expenses with that. But those 3 years, I kept thinking, what have I done? I kind of did this to myself. What are people thinking? How am I going to show up for my family, my husband, my kids? And at that point, I really felt like I wasn't going to come out of this hole, that I was just stuck in it. But the thing that kept me moving forward, my father and mom, we were immigrants that moved to Canada, Montreal, back in 1988. And my dad was 40. And he moved to Canada at the age of 40 with $500 in his pocket, and that was it. And I remember watching him struggle and work 2 or 3 jobs. My mom working in a factory at night to help with the bills. And I think just looking back at what my childhood was and how aggressively and the grit and passion that my dad and mom had working and starting their life over in North America at the age of 40, that mimicked and added work ethic for me, and that kept me going.
That's wonderful. Adonica?
I have a less just answer. Stubborn. I feel like for me, the people who know me know that I have a almost 8-year-old run streak. I've run at least a mile every day for almost 8 years. And for me, that is this. People are always impressed by it. I'm like, I'm just really stubborn. For me, I always tell my kids, this is about honoring the commitments that we make to ourselves as much as we honor the commitments that we make to other people. And when you commit to yourself that you're going to do something, I find that we are often, particularly women, willing to let ourselves down before we're willing to let anyone else down. And for me, it was about honoring the commitments that I made to myself. I said I was going to do a hard thing. I wasn't going to give up because it got a little bit more difficult than I had anticipated. And so on the hard days, it was a lot of prayer, sometimes a lot of tears, but always a commitment to myself and also to the kids of this community that I knew that this was important work that needed to be done. And no one said that it was going to be sunshine and roses every day. And so just had to dig a little bit deeper and find that stubborn version of myself.
That's such great insight. Thank you. We're talking to founders and executives today, people who may be in the middle of their own version of this. So let's close with what you'd want them to hear. I'd like each of you to finish this sentence. The rule I'm most glad I broke was, Dr. Raina, let's start with you.
Not taking patients' sorrows and disease process and sadness home. I'm glad I broke that rule.
Absolutely. Adonica?
The rule I'm most glad I broke was keeping people comfortable. I think there's a lot that requires us to be uncomfortable in order to change, and we have to be willing to look at the hard thing in order to move it forward.
Very much so. And Meredith?
I think it's a combination of those two, is that I do care and take my clients personally. It's not just business. When you hear, oh, it's just business, I have in all my businesses taken each client as an individual, and I care deeply. I am attached to the outcome, and that's a rule that you get told a good deal. Don't be attached to the outcome. And I am, and I care, and I'm willing to ask. I'm willing to ask that hard question, and it could make someone uncomfortable, but that's where growth happens. So I just think it's a combination of both.
Meredith, I want to continue with you for a minute. I love this. You've said that suffering is optional, and that was an idea that changed your life. So for a CEO who is burning out right now but would never say it out loud, what's the first conversation they need to have?
It's with himself or herself. It's got to be the conversation within, that conversation within your head that says, I have a choice. I can do something different. There are other options. I can pick up the phone and share this and have a conversation with someone else, that I don't have to do it alone, that I do not have to sit and suffer in my own racetrack of thoughts. There's a community there, and you have a choice. And I was told very, very sharply, suffering is optional. So sit down and think about that, Ms. Eicher. And I did.
It's great advice. Thank you so much. Adonica, you've said you hope for leaders who understand that we can only be as good as leaders as we are human beings in the seat. What does that actually look like in practice? What's one thing leaders should stop doing, and what's one thing they should start?
Meredith said a couple of things today that really resonated with me, but one of them is we have to be doing our own work. We have to be working on ourselves, because the way that we show up in the world impacts our ability to get things done. I think that so much of the work of improving communities is relational, and we have to trust each other, and we have to trust that we're motivated by the same things. And in order to do that, we have to recognize that it's not what we intended, it is what people receive. And so you can say a hard thing with kindness, and you can move in a way that respects the other person. And I think that that's definitely something that leaders have to recognize. And also, I think there's just this assumption of trust that people don't have in this moment. And so it requires moving at the speed of relationships. Now, that is definitely something that I have learned because I am, sometimes barreling ahead and not recognizing that the impact of what you want to get done long term is being sometimes challenged by the way that you show up in a space and the way that you lead. And so I think it's important to recognize that you can be about the right things, but if you're doing them the wrong way, you won't have the right outcomes.
So true.
So good. It's so good.
Dr. Raina, close us out. You have said you treat every patient the way you treat your mother, your father, your sister. So if every leader applied that same framework to the people they lead, what would change?
I think we'd all be happy. I really, especially in healthcare, you always hear patients complain about the doctor-patient relationship, how they don't know their doctor, or it's a quick visit, or it's just there's no personalization, there's no connection, you're just in and out, or you're just on a conveyor belt where you're just seeing one patient after the other. I think we could change that entire scene, that narrative going forward in 2026, if we just slow down and sit down with a patient and deeply connect with them and treat them just like you'd want to be treated, or just like a family member. I think that entire narrative of negativity around patient and doctor healthcare can change, but one has to be willing to make the commitment, to make a choice, do something different, to make that change and turn into a more positive outcome instead of living in the negativity of, my doctor's office visit is not fruitful or quick or not meaningful.
Absolutely. Y'all have been so amazing. This has been a great conversation. It went by way too fast. Meredith, Adonica, Dr. Raina, you have been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today. 3 women who didn't wait for permission, tore up the blueprint and drew their own, and built something worth following. That's what rewriting the rules looks like. And thanks also to our viewers for tuning in, as well as our sponsor, the East Baton Rouge Parish Library, for making this experience possible. Please join us again for the June episode of Strictly Business. Until then, enjoy and make your day a great one.